Hello everybody and welcome back to my channel. Today I'm using alcohol inks for this project, and the other supplies I'm using is a rock made by the Multi-Mold from Happy Dotting Company. I will have a link to that in the description below showing you where you can purchase that on Amazon. I'm also using flat white acrylic paint. That is important, and I will explain that in a little bit. Alcohol inks in the color of Sapphire, Baja Blue by Pinata, and Aqua by Ranger. And then 99% alcohol. And resin, of course, is always optional. All of the supplies I use in this video will be linked in the description below. So let's get started. So to start out with, I base painted my rock with Apple Barrel's flat white acrylic paint. And that's important because we want this alcohol ink to absorb into our base layer. If you use something like a Liquitex Basics, it's going to have more of a sheen to it, and I don't believe the color will absorb as much, meaning in the later steps of achieving the turtle, you're not going to get the same effect. You're going to take off too much of the paint. Or too much of the alcohol ink. So you want a flat paint that kind of absorbs the color. And then I'm taking the sapphire blue and going along the bottom of the rock, going up on the sides with the alcohol ink. And I'm using a brush and I'm dabbing it on. And I'm putting it on relatively thick. And I'm not using a whole bunch of alcohol. I'm using more just ink. I just want to get a lot of ink on the rock. So I did sapphire along the bottom and up the sides. And then through the middle lower section, I did the Baja Blue. And then up at the top, I used the Aqua. So you want it to look like you're underwater. So it's going to go from Aqua to Baja Blue to Sapphire. And I'm just working in it. Like I said, I'm doing several layers of the alcohol ink because I want a lot of ink on here. And the blotchy kind of texture looking that the alcohol ink is causing, that's fine. I don't need it smooth. I just want it thick. And then you want to make sure it's completely dry before you do this next step. And I'm just taking a small paintbrush and some alcohol, 99% alcohol, and I'm dabbing it off the brush. I'm not putting a lot of alcohol on the rock. I'm using just enough to lift the alcohol off of the rock. So we're doing this kind of in like a relief style. So we're taking the paint alcohol ink off of the rock to create the design. And so what I'm wanting this to look like is that the rocks on the bottom of the ocean floor, I'm wanting there to be rocks going along the bottom of the rock, of my rock that I'm painting on, and then up the sides of the rock. I want there to be, like coral or ocean seabed rock, something like that. And I want the hint of it. I don't want you to be able to make out each individual rock or sea coral or whatever would be down there. I just want some action in the bottom that kind of alludes to the fact that there's something going on underneath this water below the turtle. So the further you get to the center, the bottom center of the rock, towards the middle of the rock, you don't want to take off as much of the alcohol ink. So you want it to look like it's going back into the painting. And then when you get closer to the sides of the rock, you want to take off more of the alcohol ink so that it appears closer and brighter. You can see I'm not doing this in any kind of pattern. I'm just kind of dabbing my brush and removing that ink in kind of a random pattern to give that appearance of rock underneath the water. And if for some reason you do overwork the pattern, you can add alcohol ink back onto the rock to kind of fix any mistakes you made. But this is why the flat white paint is important, is because if you use alcohol ink against a plastic background, which essentially would be what alcohol, or I'm sorry, not alcohol, but what acrylic paint is plastic. If you use one like Liquitex Basics that leaves a plastic layer that feels sealed, you'll be able to take off that alcohol ink all the way to a white background. And we don't want it that stark white. We want just a lighter blue. So that's why I chose to go with the flat white, because that acrylic, I'm going to get acrylic and alcohol switched up in this video a lot, apparently. Words are hard sometimes. So the alcohol inks should absorb into the flat acrylic paint, because it's not as sealed as you would if you used like a Liquitex Basics or I can't even think of any other brands right now, Goldens or something like that. So now I'm taking my turtle, which I just picked a turtle off of Pixabay and traced out his outline, and I'm transferring that to my rock using a nail stylus or a dotting tool, as we use those a lot for dotting. And you can kind of see where my coral and sea rock stuff is down at the bottom. And I kind of keep going back and forth playing with that a little bit. So I'm using the same paintbrush, and this is a very small filbert paintbrush. I think it's Simply Simmons is who this paintbrush is by. And I'm removing the alcohol ink where the turtle is, but you want to be careful not to remove too much too fast, because you want to have highlights on his legs and his feet and on his shell. So the alcohol ink, you have to be careful how much you remove at a time. And this paintbrush works really well because it's kind of really chisels at the tip. It's a real chiseled tip. And so I can get a pretty thin line when removing the alcohol ink. And as I remove the alcohol, I'm also removing the transfer pigment from the transfer paper, so that comes off with that alcohol ink. So you definitely want to make sure to trace out do the outline of your design first, because it is going to remove the transfer design almost instantly when the alcohol hits it. So now I'm just deciding where I want kind of the highlights on my turtle and making sure to remove a little bit more of the alcohol ink. Now if you do remove too much of the ink, you can always add more ink to it, let it dry, and then remove what you want. But as long as you're careful in the beginning, you shouldn't have that problem. Just kind of take it slow and, decide where you want your highlights. Of course, the highlights are going to come from up above, so the top of the head, where the legs bend, the top of the shell, maybe places where the shell plates meet together. I also did some circular sections on those sea turtles' fins, the flipper fin things, whatever you call those, to indicate the design on their flippers. Kind of hint at that a little bit. You can see when you see me reach over to my left, that's when I'm actually grabbing more alcohol ink to put back on the rock because I felt like I removed too much. So if you see me reach over to my left, I'm adding ink. And when I stick to this little container that's over here on my right, that is the alcohol. And as you remove the ink, your alcohol is going to become contaminated. So at some point you may have to dump that out. If it becomes too contaminated, it's not really working as well. And so I'm just kind of fussing around with this design, the rocks and stuff. I just kind of go back and forth. There's a lot of fussing around with this to try to get it the way I liked. And my camera doesn't pick up the aqua. Everything just looks kind of blue on here. But the rock definitely is like a lighter green towards the top. And then kind of darkens into that sapphire. I am going to try a different camera setup for my next video. Because I've been so unhappy with the fact that purples and blues and greens sometimes just don't show up correctly on these cameras. So hopefully, fingers crossed, wish me luck, that this new camera setup will do better. It gets so frustrating. Sometimes you just want to paint and you don't want to worry about all this other stuff. But then you have to in order to have a video that depicts what your rock looks like correctly. It's frustrating when it doesn't. So anyway, like I said, I'm still just fussing around with the coral rock part. Now I signed my rock. I used an acrylic ink pen, and then you let that dry. And then I'm going to go over that with alcohol ink, because you see right now my signature is the brightest thing on the rock, and you don't want to draw your eye to that. So what I did was I painted it on, and then I went over it with a little bit of the aqua color so that you can see it, but it's not the brightest thing on the rock. It's there, and that's what the rock actually looks more like. But I've got a bad glare on there. So thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, hit like and subscribe and share with all of your friends, and I will see you in the next video.